All right, so let's dumb this down for just 1 second, because I want to ask a question that I know you don't like getting when we get in the Q&As, but I think it would be interesting for the three of us to sort of kick it around here, which is, for the average person that's listening to this, that can only take in so many of these ideas and so much of this, right? And I think that actually is most people that are just living their lives. I think a certain set of people are listening to both of you and going, all right, these two guys think that some guy is talking to them from the sky. I mean, I know this is the most, I know why you don't love this question, because it's so ridiculously oversimplified. But how do you get to those people then? For the people that think, well, wait a minute, what are you talking about? Shapiro loves facts over feelings, but he's talking about this imaginary sky guy that wrote this book and blah, blah, blah. What do you think is there a psychological trick to sort of get people over that hump if you wanted them to start exploring some of this? Because you know what I mean? We can do the high level stuff for hours and hours, but eventually it just keeps getting to a sort of smaller and smaller place that people can get to.
All right, so that's so hard a question, and so I'll try to address it this way. So there's a line in the New Testament where Christ says that no one comes to the Father except through him, which is a hell of a thing for anyone to say. I mean, there's a lot of statements in the New Testament that are strikingly strange in that manner. I am the way and the truth and the life. That's another one. It's associated with the same idea.
Yeah. And we'll get to some of the New Testament, Old Testament stuff.
So here's the idea, and it bears on your question, although I don't exactly know how. It's as if there's a spirit at the bottom of things that is involved in the bringing to being of everything. So for example, people talk about evolution as a random process, but that's not true. It's not true. The mutations are random, but there's also a lot of other sources of genetic variation. But the selection mechanisms are not random. So now then the question is, what are the selection mechanisms? So I'm going to have to go a bunch of places to answer this
Survival mostly,
well, here's one selection mechanism. It's like, so human females are very sexually selective. That's why you have twice as many female ancestors as male ancestors. So the male failure rate for reproduction is twice that of the females. Okay, so the question is, well, how is it that males succeed differentially? And the first answer is, well, females reject. Human females reject. But then the question might be, well, they reject on the basis of what? And the answer is, well, it's something like competence. And then the question is, well, how is competence defined? And then the answer to that is, well, men put themselves in hierarchies and they vote on each other's competence. And it's really counterintuitive in some sense from an evolutionary perspective, because you'd have to ask yourself, why would men put themselves in positions where they elevate some men in status and then give them a huge reproductive advantage, given that that's to their reproductive disadvantage in some sense? Okay, and there are reasons. Part of that might be, well, let's say you decide to follow the best leader in a battle. Well, then you don't die. Like, he might get all the women, but you don't die, so at least you're still in the game. And it might be the same if you're following the greatest hunter. And the greatest hunter wouldn't be the person who is best at bringing down the game. It would be the person who is best at bringing down the game and sharing it and organizing the next hunt and all of that, right? And so men will organize themselves into groups and privilege certain men, and that puts them ahead in the reproductive hierarchy. And so what that means to some degree is that there's a spirit of masculinity that's shaping the entire structure of human evolutionary history. That's what that means. And then I think, okay, well, that might just be a biological epiphenomenon. And so it would be a spirit it's the spirit of positive masculinity that manifests itself across epochal ages, millions of years perhaps, and it actually has shaped our consciousness, actually. And so you can think about that as a figure, and it would be the figure that emerges. It's like the essential spirit of all the great men who defined what greatness constituted. That's a spirit. Okay, now that's a purely biological explanation. You could say, well, that's God for all intents and purposes. You might have an image of that built right into you. Even the sense that you can experience something divine and paternal might be merely a reflection of that evolutionary process. So that would be a biologically reductive argument for the existence of what we experience as God. But then there's another possibility too, which is that that's actually reflective of a deeper metaphysical reality that has to do with the nature of consciousness itself. And I would say that I think that's true. Is I believe the biological case, and I believe the biologically reductive case, but I don't think that exhausts it. I think that there's a metaphysical layer underneath that the biology is a genuine reflection of. And that's the sort of the macrocosm above and the microcosm below. That we are really reflective, including in our consciousness, of something about the structure of reality itself. And that might involve whatever it is that God is.
Well, so that's why I think this is so interesting, because what you're doing there, especially at the end, is you're giving it a little room to say, I don't know, right?
Well, you have to.
Yeah, but I think that's what people don't want to grant you.
Well, this is why I don't like the question. Do you believe in God? Right. It's like, well, that's like, to me that question is always like, well, what makes you so sure that you know that God exists? And it's like, well, I'm not sure. I'm not willing to claim that certainty, you know, but I laid out the argument. I don't know what you think.
So what do you think about when he takes it all the way to that end, and then there's that little space at the end?
I mean, again, I don't think that that's severely problematic in terms of just general religious thought. I mean, the general religious thought going back thousands of years, and this is why when you look at Aquinas' proofs of God, what he comes to is he says basically what you say, which is if you go down deep enough, then you get to something. And that something is what we call God. So he doesn't say God, the Bible starts from the premise God exists and he created the universe. Aquinas starts from, we have a universe, what says God is there? And he says, well, when you go all the way down deep enough, there has to be a force that lies behind the combined logic of the universe, and that thing is what we call God, right? And so he's trying to reason his way back to first principles. And I think that the case for God, not in the way that we think of him as like a jolly bearded guy in the sky who like takes care of all of our problems or anything, but the idea that there is a logos, right? There's a structure, a fundamental structure to the way life is, and there is a reason and a fundamental purpose to why life is, and what lies below that you can call God, and that
consciousness has some association with it.
Well, your consciousness reflects God. Again, this is one of the fundamental. This is sort of Leibniz's proof of God, is that the principle of sufficient reason, the idea that you are capable of understanding the universe. If you actually believe you're capable of understanding the universe in any way, then your mind has to, if you believe in objective reality, as Sam does, and you believe that your mind is capable of grasping an objective reality, not an evolutionarily beneficial reality, but an objective reality, your mind is reflecting a greater mind, right? Your mind is reflecting a greater logic. Well, what stands behind that greater logic? It must be something. Right? And so this is the idea that there is a God that stands behind that. So the proof for God, I think, honestly, is not supremely difficult. And I think that we all do have, whether it's biologically sourced or, in my view, logically sourced, a belief that there is a structure to the universe, a predictable structure to the universe that didn't emerge out of simple randomness, and there's a reason that things are the way that they are, and that from that we can draw the fact that we are capable of acting within that logical universe. If everything were sheer chaos, you could not act. You'd be paralyzed by the chaos that surrounds you.
So